We're officially recording on everything.
Your two favorite people are back for good times.
Another edition. Episode 17, Launch Radio.
I mean, we are
moving right along. Don't forget your headphones so you can be like, DJ.
Right?
Scratch.
Right? I mean, that's what we need. It's like we've got a DJ system here happening.
Sort of. We think we're DJs.
We think we're DJs. But we're up to episode 17.
Crazy, yes.
Launch Radio.
I love it. I think it's really interesting. I think we're getting a ton of great feedback and really good insights from everyone that's been listening. So thank you so much to our listeners and viewers of our content. And today is no exception as to a very important topic.
I think it is a very important topic today. A lot obviously has transpired over the weekend in our country here, the United States. It's just been very tragic. There were, obviously 2 more shootings, one of which was in El Paso, and then the second one was in Dayton, Ohio. And, it's just they keep popping up, and it's so tragic just to all the families, obviously, and to all the people that, were there, had loved ones. It's just to see this keep happening. And then the aftermath and the frustration, it's all tragic. It's all very sad. And, we send our condolences certainly to everyone. But, on top of that, we wanted to talk today about how much, there's obviously a lot of things affecting like the cause. Like,
for sure. A lot of theories.
Where this comes from. There's a lot of theories and, variables and people, everybody, has something, gives a reason, whether it's video games or whether it's white supremacy or whether it's Trump or whether it's the media or mental health or gun access.
Just don't take my Call of Duty away.
It's I really think, and we wanted to discuss this today, like how the psychology of what causes this, what ideas can people create to try to prevent these from happening, and how can we try to get along to form some good solutions for
sure. Yeah. And I think, we talked a little bit before we hit the record button. The country's really in a polarized way right now. There's the people that believe this and there's people that believe this, and we're all on like really opposite sides almost. And it's really hard to find a cohesive, let's work together and figure this out. And as it becomes more polarized, the more violence happens, so it's like nothing's really getting done and nobody really knows what to do, and nobody knows, and no one can actually come together and say, this is what's causing it. Let's fix this, And I think, we could sit here for the next half hour or whatever and talk about like, gun control and politics and everything else that could cause it, right? But you can go on anywhere and talk about that. As true to our thread of our podcast, we want to talk about how AI and society mesh together and how the effects of those and humanity affect that type of thing. So, in regards to specific reasons, in terms of like mind control and what the media is doing and what they are promoting out and the verbiage they use, and certain things and certain words will create patterns in your brain and start to warp your sense of reality, and your perception starts to change.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I think that people underestimate the psychology of it. And I think it looks towards the bigger picture of society and just the psychology of society and how influenced we are by not just the media, by what leaders say, what friends say, what we've experienced in our past, just the overall psychology of why someone would walk into a Walmart with a gun and shoot people. Like, there is a big psychology factor from external forces that come in and affect people that do these things. And I think that really needs to be looked at. The thing that causes, like, the solution to the problem isn't always in the cause,
right?
And I think that we have to look at outside the box ways to try to prevent this from happening. And I don't think that we're doing that. I think that we're looking at these, people are screaming, gun control, or they're screaming, mental health or white supremacy or Trump. Nobody is thinking of different things that would cause it.
Right.
And I think that needs to be looked at more. And how do we get there? I think that at the most, we want to encourage people to start doing that, and also to know that there's multiple factors that are occurring. It's anybody who says just one thing is not,
Yeah, and it's a lot of self-awareness. Like, I had posted something on my Instagram last week about, when you're on your phone or on the laptop and you're consuming all of this information that this amazing thing called the internet provides you, what are you getting out of it? Is it fueling your life in some aspect? When you get off of your phone or your laptop, how do you feel about what you've consumed? Do you feel more angry? Do you feel more invigorated about life? What is it doing for you? Because if it's not doing anything for you, you're turning into a zombie. I mean, literally, that's what it is. You're consuming stuff just for the pure entertainment of consuming things. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is we don't necessarily understand fully, even psychologists, experts, we don't understand fully the effects of the things that we're consuming on a constant basis. So, for example, if you're constantly consuming the same category all the time, and that's all you're consuming, whatever it is, you are actually changing the way your patterns are formed in your brain and the way the synapses come together, and you start to change the way you're viewing society. And that's why, for example,
100%.
There's sites called the 8chain, for example, and we're all hearing about it now, where the guy who created it years ago is now coming out saying this was not the point of this website. The point of the website was for a free utopian free speech, unmoderated.
What's the background on 8chan? What is it?
That's the background. Is like really? So he created a site called 4chain, and he felt, and the whole premise was to create a place where people can just go and have free speech, basically an online messaging board.
Yeah.
And he felt like that became too restricted. So then he created the next gen of it, which was 8chan. And then instead of it becoming like a utopian talk about whatever you want, it started to go really, really, really into hate, violence, crime. But because it's unmoderated, they just allowed it. So it became like a dark corner of the internet. And the reason why we're all hearing about it is because one of the shooters, several of the shooters have talked about and put manifestos on there, and then they went out
on that site.
Correct. Okay. So the guy's now like, okay, well, F it. Like, I tried to create a place where you can just express things. Now it's turning into a hub of breeding violence. So the reason why I bring it up is the people that go to these online messaging boards already have preconceived notions, whether it's their life is in a spiral, a downward spiral, and they're feeling lonely and, depressed, whatever it is, they find a little group where that group also feels that too. And then it's instead of figuring out how to fix yourself, it's easier to then place your hurt on someone else and say, those people are the problem. And then hate forms around that, and anxiety and fear. And then in that little bubble, you start to talk about ways to get rid of it, and then violence. And then the more you have the interaction with other people, it starts to cement ideas in your brain.
Yeah.
It literally changes your brain patterns. And that is where you have to be very, very careful of consuming the same thing all the time, because you are literally changing your brain. And are you truly in control of your brain, or are you being controlled is the question.
Well, and that's a bigger question that goes back to like last week's, but wow, we're just all these come together, these different, last week we spoke about simulation. The week before we talked about social media algorithms, which all of these play in to exactly what you're saying. And I think that it brings in the bigger question of how much control the different, television networks have over people that watch those. Because if you watch Fox News, you always watch Fox News. You watch CNN, you always watch CNN. Whatever you're watching, we are flawed, irrational creatures, and we are very, what's the word? Easily convinced by these things.
We're manipulated.
We want to confirm. We want our beliefs confirmed, but our beliefs go into a system. It's like there's religion and there's politics, and so whatever TV network we're watching, that influences. And it also goes to social media, to Google, social different algorithms, what you type into Google, what you're seeing, everything you're seeing is influence you. And when those opinions are repeated over and over and over again, like whatever was happening on that 8chan, that influences these people. And so it brings up the question of like, is our society, what do we do? Like freedom of speech, it sounds like on that platform, it became a disaster.
Right.
Freedom
correct.
of speech was so free.
It became so free, it became violent, and a place for people who are obviously having life challenges and life struggles to come together and then breed this, I'm angry, so I'm going to place it on someone else and hate someone else. And let's create a little bit more of a violent. There's certain things where you can talk about hate and words, and then there's the I hate my life so much, I'm going to act now. It's like the modern day kamikaze, where I cease to care anymore, and I'm going to bring people with me. And if I go down, then I might as well bring people down. So it's almost like it's a suicidal mission for a lot of these. I mean, these are like 21-year-old kids. Do you know what I mean? They're doing this. And then you're like, what is going on? Oh, it's mental illness. It's not really, though. There's a mental health issue and component in it, because when you look at the patterns of all of the shooters, there's something that's jogged, whether it was something that happened at work, divorce. There's always some kind of like dad, whatever, violence in the family. There's something there, and that triggered into it. It kind of is like a wormhole. It opens up more wormholes into it. And if you start to feel lonely and depressed and angry, and you're a male, what do you do with that? And then we wonder why people go postal and shoot up places. And it's like, because people are literally hitting to the point where they're like, I don't care anymore. And instead of just killing myself, I might as well just kill a lot of people with me and get notoriety afterlife.
So how do we help these people? How do we stop that? I mean, it almost sounds like the freedom of speech in there was too free. It became bad. Like in that, like people turned to the dark side in there.
I think we have to take a very personal look, instead of like this president and this and this and things that, honestly, to be honest, guys, we can't change any of this stuff. Okay. We've elected officials, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what side you're on, who determine these things. Reacting and saying, well, it's this, is not going to change anything. It just isn't, like what you're going to go into Congress and pass gun laws. Like, it's not going to happen. You can fight and cause chaos and all you want, but how do your actions as a human being go into this? What are you doing personally to fuel this? Are you somewhat responsible for the language that is going out there? Be very careful about the words you use, because certain words will literally cement into people's brains. And then they go into a tangent where you're like, whoa, that's not what I thought. But you have no idea what these people are thinking ahead of time or where they're at in life. So something you may say or post may actually trigger that person into a little different spiral. So I think personally, yes, there's lots of things that we can do and whatever. Personally, it's taking an active role in your own consumption of media. Like, for example, if you're a stark liberal, are you watching Fox News? No,
of course not.
You don't want to feed yourself on that side because you're like, I don't watch it. So then wait, are you doing yourself a disservice because you're just perpetuating what you already know, and you're just feeding what you already like, and you stay in your bubble.
You're staying in the bubble.
So it's opening out a little bit. Get out of your little funnel, your little like, everyone's a racist, everyone's prejudiced, everyone's whatever it is, whatever you're thinking, and expand the mind a little bit. Because the more you consume one category all the time, you're just fueling those exact same notions. And frankly, I'm going to say this, and I know that might get some feedback on it. You doing that is exactly the same as these extremists. That's all it's doing. You may not be going out and shooting people, but you're consuming the exact same type of media, right? They consume their violent media and you consume your whatever media. That may not mean that you're going to act on it.
You're staying in your box. You're
still staying in your box, just like they're staying in their box. Open out your brain,
Yeah. I mean, the way I like to look at it too is and I don't know why no one else does this, because I like to look at the world this way, but a lot of people don't. Is pretend that like people just can't do this. Pretend that you just arrived on Earth, like you're like an alien. You don't know anything about any news network, or you have no preconceived notions.
Which an alien would. They wouldn't have a bias on anything.
They wouldn't have a bias about Fox News. They wouldn't have a bias about CNN. They wouldn't have a bias about Trump.
It would be
ANN. A bias about everything would be
alien national news.
Of course. Somebody else look at the world that way. Like, why can't anybody just step back and listen to the other opinions here and do that? We just don't have enough people doing that. There's probably 1% doing that. Maybe within 10% try to do that.
I think it's because people like to be in camps. I'm part of this camp, and this camp means I don't like immigrants. And then there's this camp where it's like, that's wrong. It's like, there's no in between. You're either in that camp or in that camp. And the minute you're like, well, I mean, you're immediately on your own, and you're in your own little bucket of crazy. I think people need to pick a bucket in order to feel secure in the community, whether it's online, friends, family. Pick a bucket, whatever it is.
But that in and of itself is divisive.
It's like horses when they're racing and they put blinders on. They have no idea whether the horse next to them just fell and broke its leg. They have no idea. Tunnel vision. And I feel like it's getting worse, where it's like, I only consume this part of media and it fuels my own preconceived notions anyways. I only consume this media, and everyone becomes this, just like I mentioned earlier when we started the podcast, polarized, and it starts to pull away, and we cannot find an equal balance or even come to even some remote understanding or compromise if we are doing that to ourselves. We have the responsibility to open our own minds, not the media. The media is there is just giving you what you're consuming, right? You're consuming it. open your brain, watch something else for a change, you know?
And also keep in mind too that the media has a responsibility here too to hold themselves accountable in all they're doing.
Correct.
Because the media, obviously, which everybody knows, tends to be very biased now to each side. And so there's a responsibility that they have as well, as far as what they're saying that is factual, as far as what's happening with an event versus what's an opinion. And they blur the line quite a bit.
You know, it's kind of interesting. I think when our parents were younger, you know, they had like Walter Cronkite.
Was the guy.
And it was like the unbiased, everyone kind of watched him because it was like, he wasn't on either side. He was just like, here's the news. He was like you could be our modern day Walter Cronkite.
I have no bias. Well, I have bias. Everybody has bias, but I have very, very little bias.
And if he did, he never showed it and was able to just, here's the facts, you know? Now it's like, what are the facts? You know? And then I think because everyone's so polarized, all of a sudden we're seeing this like the conspiracism group rise, you know? And they're like, hey, if you don't believe in any of this, believe this,
it's
you know?
These external bad forces come in.
But they're not bad. They're just conspiracy theorists. And there's nothing wrong with them because there are some conspiracies where you're like, I mean,
some people,
maybe that could potentially be accurate. But you're getting these camps that are like, are you conspiracism? Are you in this bucket? Or are you in this bucket? And it's like, why do I have to be in a bucket? What is this, high school and we're on our own little cliques?
Right.
Like, can we open our thinking just a tad, maybe take the blinders off? And I think it comes a lot, you know, it's interesting. When you read certain quotes and certain things register with you and you get upset and you're like, oh, I can't believe that person said that. Do you read the quote and not who said it? Or have you done the reverse where, you know, you're reading it and you already know who the person that said it? So who is actually controlling what you're thinking? So for example, if you read something like, you know, guns are good. We need, you know, Second Amendment's healthy. We need to be able to secure that. And people are like, yes, I love that person, whoever said it. And then that person turns out to be President Obama. Does your perception change? Is it the messenger or is it the message? Who was controlling who? You know, like you've got to be really careful about that stuff. And it's kind of, I'll let you speak.
No, I mean, there's a great video online of where that happened, where I was at a college, these people were at a college campus and they went around and told people it was some Obama supporters that it was a Trump quote. And then they were like, they hated it. I forget what it was about. It's about immigration or something. And they hated it. And then they revealed to them that it was actually Obama that said it. It was actually Obama that said the quote. So people have no idea how often that happens.
Yeah.
How much is the information that is being, you know, portrayed to you, that is being told to you, the information, and how much is it the person saying it and how you perceive that person? And I think that one of the kind of hidden, you know, menus within society that we don't talk about enough is that people are very influenced by what their perception is of a person versus what the person is saying.
Right.
And that too easily influences, and our beliefs, our subconscious stores those memories and those beliefs, and it hardens and it builds about people, about certain people. And so that is something people don't know to look at or don't want to look at, but I think we need to look at it a lot more.
100%. And it goes back to the fact where it's like, what are you consuming? Are you opening up your consciousness to other ideas that may go against what your preconceived notions are. Because ultimately, in our last podcast, we were talking about our purpose on Earth and our purpose here. And it's to expand, and find that inner higher conscious level.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot get there by thinking with blinders on and just being like, well, everything Trump says is terrible. And it's like, hey, that may be the case. You may read every single quote and be like, no, but be very careful with that, because you really have no idea until you really look at the message versus who's actually saying it, and it's consuming other things that you may not perceive as something that you would be interested in perceiving. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, expand the brain,
There was a quote that Cher said something a few weeks ago where Cher said that there were, I don't know, something about too many immigrants in Los Angeles, or that she was afraid they were taking jobs. She was like upset about them. And then Trump retweeted it and said, finally, Cher and I agree about something. and then Cher came back at him and they were fighting about it. But you then perceive and you look at these things and you realize like, whoa, like all of this stuff is how we're perceiving the person saying it. So people could have agreed with Cher and then realized like, oh, Trump said those same words before, but we don't like Trump. But wait,
I like Cher. Oh God, what a conundrum.
Yeah.
Who do you like in that point? Is it Cher or Trump?
Yeah, and the same can go the other way, with somebody who takes the other side, like AOC, who gets, massive criticism from the right. If you really often look at her words, a lot of what she's saying isn't as terrible, I mean, as people make it out to be, and you really have, because they perceive her in a certain way, just like people perceive Trump in a certain way. And so the way we're perceiving people is massively taking over what people are actually saying. And
I think the split decisions that we're making, this like quick to judge, is turning off the part of our brain where we're like, let me take 2 seconds and just think about this before I respond. It's this, no, rah, like fire back. And it's like, wait. Why don't you let it process in your brain first, get some logic in there, get some reasoning, and then maybe respond, but because we're in this modern day age of like, I have to quickly think of things and make a judgment right away. You're training your brain in that direction, And
that leads to training your brain one way or the other leads often to not a good place, like what happened in the 8chan, whatever it was, the website, because you're only going into such one way of thinking.
Correct.
That it can spread hatred, and it's divisive and it spreads hatred. And it sounds like to me that's where at least the one guy, he came from, that, whatever that conspiracy theory side is.
How many times have we, they'll do all the backgrounds on these shooters. They're trying to put a profile together and they're like, wow, why did this happen? You're like, really? And they put it together, and then you hear people come on to interviews and say, I went to school with this kid. He seemed really cool. He was fun. I never saw any signs, and it's like, yeah, because there doesn't need to be. He's consuming a certain type of media or a certain type of information that's fueling his own emotions, his own life struggles.
It's fueling his emotions.
It's fueling everything in that moment. And it makes him feel wanted. It makes him feel part of a group. For a society that is so consumed with our own selves, and we're like, oh, I don't need to go out today. I'm just going to have everything delivered to me, and I don't need to talk to anyone. We're turning into like Wall-E. I mean, seriously, where antisocial behavior is becoming even heightened, and men actually are much more likely to be diagnosed with antisocial behavior. So it's like, okay,
there needs to be a
connections.
I just, if anything out of today's podcast, just looping it all back to, the motivations of the one gunman and everything, which, came from this terrible one-sided place that fueled his emotions. If there's one thing that people can do and get out of this podcast, it's to try to see the big picture within society, within the public, your friends, politics, social media, and try to see where things are influencing you. When you hear something that sparks you emotionally, before you always react, take a step back and listen to what was said or read carefully what was written, because our preconceived notions influence us more than anybody would ever believe. Right. So start paying attention to how you react to everything. And I think overall that brings awareness to your humanity.
100%.
And it improves your overall consciousness, your what do you call it? Just consciousness, I guess. It makes you a more self-aware person. And that's what we strive to do here is help people become more aware, strengthen human awareness. And today is more around the humanity of our podcast. And so bringing it back, that's kind of what I think we want people to get out of it.
I think that was an amazing conclusion to it. I think that was really, right? Ultimately, you're only in control of your reactions.
Yeah.
No matter if someone pushes that button on you, doesn't matter. You're the only person in control of your own reactions. You can't control one thing on planet Earth. We could have an earthquake right now and a 9.8 and I'll die. Yeah. We can't control that. Can't control if I go to the store and get shot. Can't control that. I can control my reactions when I read something or someone says something to me or whatever. It's being aware.
Be aware. Be aware. Kira and I always strive to be aware when we're doing this podcast.
I'm aware of you.
Kira's aware of me. I'm aware of Kira.
I'm aware that we're long lost brother and sister from a different Mr. and mother.
I mean, we sure are. And that this is the future, and the future is launch radio.
That too, I'm aware of that.
With that said, in all this awareness, next week, we spoke about it a little bit earlier, but we have a great, exciting
I think it'll be fun.
And we're going to share with you guys some quotes in which you don't know who said the quote.
Correct.
And we're going to have people, we want to see what people think who said these quotes, because a lot of them, it might not be what you think.
Right.
So we're going to play a little fun game. It's like quoting we've got to create like a name. We'll create something fun.
Who said it?
Who said it? It's Geoff and Kira. That's what we do around here. So with that said, it'll be a fun show next week.
I think so too. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And check us out next week. And
we're the future. The future is Launch Radio. Peace out.